Chapter 4 RRC and an Album of Memories. I apologised to Sam that same afternoon and then about 100 more times, but it was into next week and he still wouldn't talk to me. He had to wear his old babyish pair of glasses with light blue frames that pinched the bridge of his nose. Every time I saw them, I felt my shame pinching too. In the last week of school holidays, I went to visit Pop at the RRC, the Rye Rehabilitation Centre, which was 2 sections away on the 787 Sorrento to Safety Beach bus. I can't really remember it, but Pop used to live with us in the big house when it was just me, him and Mum. But then Luca came back when I was 3, and Pop had a granny flat built out the back, a little boxy house with a brown roof, cream walls and a ramp on the front. Inside it had a tiny kitchenette, lounge room, bedroom and bathroom. I once asked Pop why he didn't live with us in the big house, and he said, "A castle can only have one king," and I still didn't really know what that meant. And I never even thought to ask why he didn't have his own place somehow. I could never imagine him not being with us. But then late last year it really happened. Pop slipped in the shower and cracked 2 of his ribs. He didn't tell us, he just pretended everything was okay, even though he was limping a little bit. He came up to the big house for breakfast and dinner as usual and helped me with my homework every day after school. But 2 days later he couldn't get out of bed and we had to call an ambulance. He stayed in hospital for 2 weeks, and then he caught a bout of pneumonia and had to stay for 4 more. I thought he'd come back to the flat after that, but he couldn't. Luca said the fall had shaken him, and he wasn't as young as he used to be. He said it'd take longer for Pop to heal, so Pop moved into the RRC, but only temporarily. It's this big place. It's not really a hospital, and not really a nursing home, but something in between. He even had to walk with a frame while his ribs were still recovering. Luca said we'd go visit every weekend, but it was too hard to go for seeing Pop every day to only once a week, so Luca bought me a bus ticket and travelled the 787 with me twice to make sure I'd be okay. I promised not to talk to strangers and to let the RRC receptionist know when I arrived and when I was leaving so he could call in and check on me. That's what it was like to have a policeman for a father. Luca let me go there every Wednesday afternoon, plus every weekend he'd take me too. It still wasn't the same as having Pop back home, but at least it was something. That afternoon I knocked on Pop's bedroom door and he called, "Come in, Fred," because he knew the bus timetable as well as I did by then. Pop's room at the RRC smelt like English breakfast tea and this cinnamon cologne he sprayed on himself every morning. It was how his flat still smelt, even though it was just an empty flat in our backyard like a giant garden ornament. "So, did Luca tell you about the baby?" Pop asked me right away. He was sitting in the reading chair by the window, a paperback book open in one hand and his grey eyes focused on me. "You knew?" Pop and Luca spoke on the phone a couple of nights a week. He nodded. "For a while now." And then he sighed when I gave him a hurt look. "It was not my news to tell you, Fred." I slipped my backpack from over my shoulders and went to give him a kiss on the cheek, and then sat cross-legged on the floor by his feet. "You know, Maria, your mother would be happy for him." I frowned, and instead of saying something, I got up on my knees and searched over to Pop's coffee table, where his photo albums were stacked. He has a ton of them in a big wooden chest in his flat, but the chest was too big for his room at the RRC, so he just took his 2 favourites with him, thick ones full of the last 30 years. "You know it's true, Fred," Pop started to say, but before we could get another word in, I'd flipped one of the albums. "Where was this taken?" I pointed to a photo of him and Nan that I really liked. It was in black and white, but you could still tell the heels she was wearing were leopard print, and I thought she looked wicked cool in them. Pop squinted over my shoulder to look. "Queenscliff, for our anniversary 1 year," he said, and then he smiled. I held up a photo of Mum next from her secondary school days. Her blonde hair was flicked out around her head, and she was wearing a school uniform with a short blue skirt and a neatly tucked white shirt. The photo had this glow of the olden days. "What was she like in high school?" I asked, pleased that Pop wasn't talking about Luca, Annika, or the baby anymore. "Oh, she went on a tear, skipping school and going into the city every chance she could, hanging out with boys with bad haircuts." Pop sighed. "We lost Winifred the year before. It hit her hard." Nan died of cancer when my mum was a teenager. When I was really little, I could never understand how Mum grew up without her mum around. I couldn't imagine how that could be, and then it happened to me. "There was a lot I probably missed, but..." He shook his head a little. You're lucky you still have Annika around to talk about growing up and getting older and things you maybe don't want to talk to your dad about, or me. I rolled my eyes and reached for the second of Pop's albums. It was my favourite one, from Mum and Luca's wedding. The cover was this baby blue leather and the words, Wedding Memories, in curly white writing. I opened the book up and there were 3 of us, Mum, Luca and me as a toddler, stuck down on the page behind a sheet of clear plastic. My mum was beautiful, even though she wasn't wearing a proper wedding gown like the ones you see in movies and on TV. Just a simple flower dress in a buttery yellow colour with little pearl buttons all the way down the middle. Her skin was lightly tanned and her hair was twisted up on her head so you could see the small diamond earrings that Luca had given her. They used to belong to his mama and they were waiting for me in a dresser when I was older. Luca looked a lot younger then, probably because he had long black hair. He shaved it all off when he became a policeman. He wasn't wearing a tux or anything fancy in the photo either, just a crisp white shirt tucked into the back black pants. Someone had stuck a yellow daisy in a buttonhole on his shirt, right in the middle of his chest, so he'd match Mum. I could almost remember picking it for him and holding it up, him crouching down and helping me stick it through the buttonhole. He was holding me up in the photo, kind of in the crook of one arm so my head was level with his, and Mum was standing on his other side, her arm hooked around his middle. We really looked happy there. Because you were, Pop said, and I believed him. Even if I couldn't really remember how happy we were, I felt better because Pop still did. Why didn't you get married again after Nan died? I asked. When I was little, I was so worried about Luca falling in love, but I figured that because Pop hadn't, there was a good chance it would always just be the 3 of us. It was different for you or Nan and me. We had a lifetime together, and there was never going to be anyone else. But with Luca and Maria, it wasn't fair. They should have had more time. I whispered the next part, and Pop had to lean down a little to hear me. Do you think he still loves her? I didn't need to say who. Pop knew I meant Mum. Fred, you should know that it's very easy to be both happy and sad at the same time. And it's possible to love 2 people at once and miss someone so much or even while you move on without them, he said inside. And yes, I think he still loves her. That's a good question to ask Luca so you can hear him tell you so. But I knew I wouldn't, because it was also possible to want to know an answer so badly, but still be too scared to ask the question.